Let's explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
When we're laying on our deathbed, you're not going to worry about how much money you had, how much power you had, how much prestige. You're going to see that that was all game, that was all an illusion. The only thing that's going to matter is the impact you had on other people's lives.
We are all on a separate journey. But the beautiful thing about our life here on this earth is at my funeral, they ain't going to talk about my success. They're going to talk about who Nick was and how Nick lived and how Nick loved and encouraged.
Success is incredibly important, but even more important than success, it's having an impact. It's knowing you haven't walked the planet in vain. It's knowing that because you've been here, you've blessed lives, you've developed people, and you have made the world a better place.
The effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. Everything you gain in life will rot and fall apart, and all that will be left of you is what was in your heart.
Life is a mirror. And life gives us not what we want. Life gives us who we are. When you were born, you cried while the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way that when you die, the world cries while you rejoice.
Have you ever stopped to wonder about the soul behind the spotlight? The truth behind the headlines? Beneath every glamorous facade lies a story waiting to be told. A journey full of triumphs, struggles, heartaches, and victories. Welcome to People, the groundbreaking new series here on the AlphaWarrior Show. Tonight, we're setting politics aside, no hidden agendas, no filters, just pure, raw humanity. In a world that constantly tries to categorize us, it's easy to forget what binds us together. Our shared experiences, our laughter, our tears, and the authentic moments that define who we truly are. Each week, we're going to explore the powerful, emotional, and beautifully imperfect lives of people who inspire us, captivate us, and remind us that we're all in this incredibly messy and extraordinary journey together. We'll laugh, we'll reflect, and we'll dive deep into the stories that often go untold, unapologetically, real, and deeply personal. Get ready to meet the heart behind the headlines, the reality behind the reputation, the persona behind the person, the grit that makes these amazing people tick. This is People, real stories, real connections, real life. And when we come back from this commercial, it's showtime, and I hope you enjoy.
You deserve more than sluggish mornings and blood sugar spikes. Discover the simple daily system that helped so many regain health without dieting or exercise routines. 2 easy-to-take daily drinks. A brain-boosting, appetite-suppressing morning blend that ushers in energy and clarity. A hearty, fiber-packed pre-meal drink that stabilizes blood sugar, aids digestion, and fights cravings. It's a gentle, science-backed path to improved metabolism, renewed vitality, and lasting weight control. Feeling better starts with this simple 2-step daily protocol.
Today, listen, they make it very simple. You're going to get a box, and in that box, there's going to be 3 smaller boxes. You're going to have 2 boxes of this stuff right here, Ultimate, and you're going to have 1 box of this right here, Balance. Then there's a barcode or a QR code that's on there that'll give you the instructions on what this stuff does, all the benefits to it. But more importantly, you're going to realize, start one of these in the morning, one of these mid-afternoon around lunchtime, and then you want balance with dinner. Now, what I will say is my heaviest meal is lunch. So I've modified my usage that I use this at lunchtime. You want this to be used with the heaviest one. But here's the thing, man, if you guys are battling high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, all these different, overweight, just whatever it is, give these people a shot. You got a 90-day money back guarantee. I'm drinking some right now. Balance is the one that I'm drinking, or I'm sorry, Ultimate is the one that I'm drinking right now, or Ultimate Unimate. I'm tired, folks. And the flavor's good. This tastes like a lemonade type of thing. But anyways, you absolutely live it. Give it a try. And then our next sponsor, and then I got an amazing guest lined up for you guys right now. You guys know the Van Man. Van Man's taking down big toothpaste with all natural oral care, right? Van Man's tooth powder is loaded with minerals like eggshells and bone, and combined with pulling oils and peppermint. Aloe Mouthritz, it's truly the ultimate fluoride-free dental hygiene bundle that saves you 25% off individual prices, and the van never stops. Introducing Van Man's new Pearl Eye Cream and Sweet Onion Shampoo. Head over to badlandsmedia.tv/vanman. That's badlandsmedia.tv/vanman to see what's new. Help support the people, support these shows. There's a reason we get to keep these shows free, folks. And it's because we got awesome partners. We have awesome sponsorships and affiliates. So Van Man, and you got Unicity. You guys will love this stuff. And then, like I said, you'll get this cool water bottle when you get that. And here's the other thing. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it even tells you what water measurement for your balance, what water measurement for your other one, Unimate, and you're good to go. So with that, folks, I have the opportunity to bring a lot of people on here and hear their stories and share those stories with you guys. And essentially, you guys just get to watch a conversation unfold. But every now and then, I get to bring on someone that's not just a story or a person that people know, but it's someone that I get to call a friend. And the man I'm going to bring on right now is, this guy has been a friend of Alpha from the very beginning, come the OGs. Back when I was like, I'm going to start a podcast and I don't know what I'm doing. And we were all fighting battles. And the story you're going to hear is this man was given the news that nobody ever wants to hear. And he didn't curl up in a ball and he didn't fold. He fought. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let me bring my friend Chris Moreno to the screen. Bro, how are you doing? And thanks for joining me.
Alpha, I got a lot more gray in my beard since we first met. I think you had a little bit of a baby face back then.
I tell you, man, stress adds years. So just kind of give you a quick rundown how we do the show. We'll kind of get into your life story. We'll focus on some points that I know are of significance. But at the end of the show, we'll finish with some rapid fire stuff. It gives the audience a chance to learn a little bit more about you. You don't have to really think about it, but you'll have fun with it, and the audience looks forward to it. But let's start off this, who's Chris Moreno, bro? Let my audience kind of know a little bit about you.
Well, it's interesting because, as we'll probably talk about, I've kind of gone through a change, right, in the last 5 years, almost like a new life. And so who I am is a father, once married, right, divorced, but also a former political operative by trade, and a great salesman. and I obviously am a person of faith. I'm a Christian. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my faith. And just I love family, and I love great friends like you.
100%. Without doxing yourself, what part of the country did you grow up in?
The Heartland. Yeah, I grew up in the Heartland, man. So straight from the Midwest, Champion City. Except this year.
We will get there. So let's get into the political operative before we get into like the really heavy part of your story. When you say a political operative, kind of walk us down that path, because a lot of people are going to get straight to like, oh, is this dude deep state? Like, I'm here an operative here. Well, how did that journey kind of start for you?
So, my family, family history wise, my family was very big in the Midwest in the unions for a long time. Forever, really. And so most of the building and trades, most of the unions in the Midwest was one of my relatives probably running it at some point. But my father was a UAW boss and a very powerful union leader. And growing up, he's also my best friend and my inspiration, a Vietnam veteran, and man, best dad ever. And I wanted to be like him. And so I would tag along with him and, local races, things that where the unions are endorsing, maybe a local congressional race, but also like city races, state reps, state senators, mayors, those kinds of things. And I would just volunteer. I'd be the kid volunteering there or just watching as he was in meetings. And that's how it started.
And what were some of the things you did? Like, were you out there stealing elections, bro? Or, I mean, come on, Democrats.
Oh, well, later on in life, but, as a young kid, it was, door knocking. It was, helping at fundraisers, sign-in sheets. That's where it started as I was in, middle school and high school, and you kind of move up from there and you obviously build relationships. And I think maybe God blessed me with a little bit of a gift. And so I obviously rose with it, and went from there. And so I was on 2 presidential campaigns, 2000 coordinated.
Before we get into the presidential campaigns, I'm just kind of curious. Did your father ever tell you something like, "Hey, son, you sure you want to go this way?" Or was he encouraging of it? Did he welcome it to you? What was that conversation as you started to get older and he started to recognize, this kid likes this?
I think he thought it was really good. I think he knew that I had a gift, and I think that he knew his thing. He always said to me, he to this day would always say to me, which is also what I say to my son, is, you got something special. Just, blaze your path. Don't get in trouble. Stay within the law, and always believe in yourself.
Right on. And so, okay, so take us there. 2 presidential parties. How does one get into, that level, and I'm curious to like, what was your level? Were you like, how close did you get to the level of, where you actually have an effect on what's going on?
So I had I got all the way up. I was paid by the DNC, and so that was something that I definitely was paid on, and I it was kind of crazy. It's kind of a crazy ride, to be honest, but it started, with the small stuff, field organizing, putting together forums. Quite frankly, I was also very good at opposition research, and so I was the guy that would find the information if I needed to find the information, and whatever that whoever I was working for, whatever campaign or principal, and I kind of went up from there, and became a political staffer and a trusted hand that delivered. If I was told I needed to deliver something, it got done. And how high up? I mean, when I left, and we can, it's kind of a fast track, but I stepped away from all of that in 2010 with the rise.
Before we get there, and I want to get there though, I want to pry some of this stuff out because when you're a political operative, that's a shark world. I would imagine. Did you ever kind of find yourself when you're doing this opposition research? Did you ever kind of find yourself like maybe I should leave this one in the closet for this person? Or was it like blood in the water? Like, I got you, bitch.
When you're a researcher, you do opposition research, of course, which is your target, right? Who you're beating, how you're going to win. Like you're providing them the information and the ammo, and they can choose what they're going to use to win, right? And they can also choose not to use some of the information and maybe win or maybe lose. What the awkward parts were for me, and for I think most people just in general, is when you have to do the self research. You got to also do the candidate research, right? And so I got to do the background on the candidate. And of course, I'm this young kid who this candidate doesn't know. He paid, his campaign manager or political director. And we're not talking about city council races. These are Congress, statewide officials. And you got to run some information, maybe some state rep, state legislative seats, state Senate seats, things like that. But these are still pretty good sized seats. And you got to run some background, got to run background on that person, their wife, their spouse, their whole background. And, you know, when you find out some things that are a little uncomfortable, you know, you got to have that conversation, and it's for their benefit, right? It's on the front side. Hey, here's the deal. And you got to ask some questions up front, and more times than I'd like to admit, the candidates weren't honest, and you have to come back and say, or the campaign manager has to come back and say, hey, you know, we asked you these questions up front. This wasn't the case. And now we got to figure out the answers to this so that we know how, because if I found it, they found it. Right. And so that's how you have to look at it.
Dang, man. That's this straight digital battlefield in order to get somebody into office, because that affects the laws and policies and choices, the direction of the country. So it's so freaking important. And just to know that what you're talking about is happening like in all these races.
Yeah, well, this was also before, like, some of this was before social media, or like the rise of social media. Like, you know, we're talking early social media days. MySpace was still around, right? You know, you had trackers carrying cameras on their shoulder. You know what I mean? This is the kind of old school deal. So you're digging through, you're digging trash. You got people pulling trash. You got trackers. You have folks that are, you know, obviously following people, like, just to try to get a pattern on who this person is or their spouse. If there's some word out there, you're talking to friends, family. You know, you in order to be successful at that, you have to have feet on the ground, LexisNexis, and a whole host of other things. And that's what we would do.
Man, like, that's right.
I learned, man, I'm one of the best, actually. But there also, I will say, it comes back to haunt you, because when you're opposition research or even candidate research, you're making an enemy. You know what I mean? There's no way about that. Right. And so it was, you knew what you were doing when you got into it, you know. But if you were good at it and you won, there's no silver medal in politics, right? So you continue to move on, and you're protected because people win.
So, I mean, obviously you sound like you're good at it. You recognize that you're good at it. What shifted? Like, what was there a series of moments, or was there a moment? What made you think that, you know, I'm not doing this no more, I'm done?
It was the Obama folks. So I grew up in a kind of a Kennedy, Midwest, union, blue collar, blue dog Democrat family. That's what was my values. You know what I mean? Like fairly conservative in my beliefs. You know, still open. You know, like I'm not. Just the bottom line is the Obama people came in. We were in a meeting. My boss, actually, to answer your question, in this towards the end there, my boss ran the DSCC, the Democrat Senatorial Campaign Committee at the national level. He was one of their top consultants, the DCCC. And he was at both of my bosses, actually, were NDI, National Democrat Institute. So they were in Kosovo, they were in Ukraine, they were in some of these places. And it was if I'm being completely transparent, it was the Clinton machine. I came up under the Clinton machine. And so most Democrat operatives in the Midwest in the 90s and early 2000s and across the country were the Clinton machine. The Clintons ran the DNC. Then you had the Obama people come in, and these were the weirdos, man. These were the people that were like the MoveOn.org ultra leftists that had no problem getting in your face back then. These were the people you would have to have your principal or your candidate avoid at the bean feeds or the county fairs or whatever it is, because they had no decorum. They had no understanding of how to conduct yourself in public. They were just radical leftist communists. I mean, that's ultimately what it was. And so we had a meeting. Yeah.
Are you able to share anything? Because I don't want to put you in violate any NDAs or things like that. But are you able to share like any of the things that you kind of seen behind the scenes that kind of, you know, gave you this thought process and position that you had with opinions that you have?
2005, I was sent out to California, Santa Monica to be precise, to shadow a couple of organizations out there on how they fundraise, believe it or not, on a door-to-door campaign. The California organizations, liberal organizations, have always been very, very good at fundraising. I was sent out there to shadow, and the individuals that were overseeing those operations, they were multiple arms. So like you had to what you're seeing today actually this is where this kind of really first started, was like the Sierra Club, a Democrat majority group, local Democrat other group, and it was all ran by the Santa Monica renters' rights leaders, which was the Weather Underground. It was Jane Fonda's first or second ex-husband. He was part of the Weather Underground. He was a an alderman in Santa Monica. A lot of the members of Congress that you see today, Julia Brownlee, I mean, we can go down the list, out of California, were candidates for city council at the time, and they were being groomed to go for Congress. And they were there, and these were communists. I mean, when you walked into the house, the mansions in Pacific Palisades and Santa Monica and these places, they had, Noam Chomsky and other, other communist folks on their walls, their books, all that stuff, and you knew precisely what it was. And they were going through a rebrand. So this is where you had they were trying to pivot away from Noam Chomsky, and they brought in George Lakoff, who's their prime linguist now. And the message was, we are moving from the Noam Chomsky version of socialism to a more acceptable terminology in progressivism. And this is where a lot of the language came about. So like, he has a book, don't think like an elephant, these kinds of things. And the reality is this started in 2005 after the Bush, W. Bush beat John Kerry, the Swift boat, right? They said, we got to rebrand. This is what we got to do. And then that's what they did.
This is wild, man. And the reason I ask you this stuff, Chris, is, my background's military and law enforcement. And so when, I'm watching news or the headlines or video footage from something, I see it differently than the normal, just American citizen that's watching that news. Like I can see, I can recognize an operation when I see that law enforcement starting to do this or position here. Like I see, I'm like, oh, I know where it is. I know what the next, 2-3 days looks like. I know what the next 2 weeks are going to look like, because that's my background. With all this experience that you have, do you kind of see all the stuff that we're seeing, whether it's candidates, whether it's, some of the relationships between Trump and, people where they were good, they're not good, like MTG, just to throw an example. When you see these things, do you kind of recognize it a little different and be like, I see where this is going, whether it's a campaign strategy or something that you're like, I knew that relationship was going to sever? Do you recognize that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the operation's still the same. Obviously it's grown significantly. It's become, this at this point, it's a giant monster, multi-billion-dollar monster that we're seeing right now with these Nick Shirley videos, this, where, these are multi-billion-dollar nonprofits and, NGOs that are funneling these paid rioters but ultimately these people are operations. These whole things are operations. And the reality is this is where this came to, but you knew it the moment you saw it, especially when the rise of the Obama campaign. So people think Obama ran for office like in 2007 when he announced, but the truth is his people were trying to ramrod people in 2006, late 2006, and having meetings, telling people you're going to fall in line or we're going to run you over. That was a direct quote. And the meeting they had with us, with our team, was a 5-minute meeting, and that was the quote. We stood up and said, some expletive. My boss, who never talked, by the way, he was a very quiet person, stood up and said, you can go F yourself. Let's go. And we left. It was a 5-minute meeting. The gal that was in the room that made the presentation was a gal named Buffy Wicks from your home state, who was the sponsor of the infanticide bill in California. Back then, she was just a little political operative who was a very powerful political operative for then candidate Barack Obama.
So these people that we're seeing that are running for these congressional positions, these are not people like we kind of think, oh, they just got tired of seeing stuff and they're like, I'm going to go do my part for the country. What I'm actually learning here, and granted, I anticipated this existed in some of the situations, but what it sounds like is these people are found and groomed from the very beginning So by the time they're running for Congress, they already know exactly how this game's played. They already have the networking. Like the establishment has already kind of figured out who's going to go along with the program. Who are the people that are problem childs? Like, you know what? Now these people are too unpredictable. They're going to create a headache for us. Like this machine we're fighting actually has been
20 years.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 20 years in the making. So like Kamala Harris, vice president, United States senator out of California, a former attorney general of California. Her sister was Maya Harris, who was with the Center for American Progress. The vice president, the nominee for vice president on the top of the ticket, who we're seeing now front and center in Minneapolis, Tim Walz, Tampon Tim. His start was not an operative. I'm sorry. He was a volunteer turned paid campaign field person for Carrie Edwards in Minnesota in 2004 on that campaign. I know his boss, the people that his little regional field organizer reported to, and he like volunteered and became part of like a veterans, because on the Democrat side they always do like these veterans for Carrie Edwards or veterans for Obama or whatever, right? And so he was like the regional representative in that area for that. And that's how they found him and decided to run him and build a story around him to run for Congress. And then eventually, we see where he was today.
Damn. So you were in the thick of it to have this kind of understanding. Because I mean, I knew that you were in it. I mean, I've done shows with you. I've heard the information you provide phenomenal information on a lot of these geopolitical spaces. So I was familiar with that, but I didn't realize like how in it you were.
Yeah, we came up. So a lot of these folks, we all came up together, and so literally the top brass of Hillary's 2016 campaign, the Mook Mafia, like we all came up together in 2000 and 2004. So Marlon Marshall ran Hillary's field campaign, right? Like Robbie Mook literally ran the campaign. I mean, these are people who all came up. We all came up at some point together, worked together, or knew of the operations and how each other. I mean, it's just that when we were babes, right? We were young back then. You know what I mean? But you continue to move up, and that's how that works. And especially on the Clinton side and on the Obama side. They're very loyal to their operatives as long as you do whatever they need, right? And so those guys were very good at what they did.
When you guys were in there, now granted, like you said, especially in the earlier days, this is before like the massive explosion of social media. What was the mindset of knowing that people were probably trying to infiltrate your ranks that were working, for them would have been the Republican Party?
It was a little different, right? Like this infiltration of the ranks type of thing, it existed, but it mostly existed in like DC, right? There was a saying back in the day, like you go to DC, an operative goes to DC to die, right? Is essentially what the joke was, right? The point is you're either up on the campaign side as a political person or you're a government person, right? And but social media changed all that, and that's where a lot of some of this stuff happened. But it's not to say that infiltration didn't happen. There clearly was a uniparty, right? Like there clearly was professional operatives on the Republican side who did a phenomenal job of always making sure Republican candidates lost. That was literally their job. And I'm sure there was some on the Democrat side, but the Clinton machine was a very well-oiled machine. It would have been very difficult for that to happen.
Damn. So, I interrupted you. You were telling us kind of like your exit strategy of how this kind of unfolded. So please continue with that.
Well, I mean, I had babies. We had 2 kids, and life constantly going. Not getting home till 1 a.m, having to be up to do something else at 7:30 in the morning, and going takes its toll. And the rise of the Tea Party, obviously the Democratic Party was getting wiped out, and I was going through some personal stuff on my own in terms of when you have 2 kids, it's not like today. Like I'm not Pete Buttigieg getting months off as the Secretary of Transportation for paternal leave. It was like, dude, you have 2 kids. Like, I don't care. You need to show up. And, and it just at that point I had to prioritize my kids, and I felt called to prioritize that. I mean, I didn't want to be the dad that ends up getting divorced and sees my kids once a month or something, you know what I mean? And so, we made a decision to, to walk away from that. Probably wasn't the smartest decision, by the way, in that respect, in terms of timing, because it was the Great Recession. Right. And so I couldn't find a job if my life depended on it. It was a humbling moment that wrecked me. If I'm being completely honest, on a personal level, kind of wrecked me for a few years, because you're having to adjust from something like that, where you have access and you're at these events, these people. Like, most of these people I knew on a first name basis, or still know, quite frankly. But then you have to go and you have to try to get a job. And, and at that time, my resume was political campaigns. They didn't understand that it's operations, it's numbers driven. I could break down a win number and tell a candidate, could tell if a candidate's serious or not serious, and tell them precisely within, give or take a few hundred votes, on a larger campaign, where they're going to land in order to win, at that 50.001, in order to pull off a victory. Right. And so people don't understand that. They think it's just like a campaign, like, oh, you're out there with politics. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Wild, man. So you leave that, which I would say, God's timing is God's timing, man. It doesn't make sense usually until 20, 30 years later. But I think you made a good choice, considering, we're both fathers. And I respect that. But then and if I'm way off in the story, correct me, you end up getting hit with some bad news, later in life. How much longer after you kind of leaving the campaign and going on to being a regular dude, did that news kind of hit? And let's get into that part of the story.
So I phased out of what I was doing and became a consultant. This was going into 2011, and a political consultant. And this is, I actually was in this is 2010. I'm sorry. I actually did a primary race, and I had a lot of candidates. And when you're out in the Clinton machine, man, like, you're not back in, you know what I mean? At least with things that I did. Right. And so obviously I picked a couple of races. I picked one race in particular that I, probably was not, I don't know, the smartest race. He had supported a governor that I worked for, and I thought he would have been a great candidate, and he still would have been a great candidate. But he was running against a guy whose dad was like mob, and it just didn't work out well, right? So I lost all my contracts, but in that, the election was decided by one vote, and that's where the Somali fraud I was first put together. I had a team that put together a full operation. It was a recount. I was a hand recount, and I have a 100-page dossier that I still have, by the way, that outlined precisely how these Somali folks steal elections and live off the taxpayers in exchange. And there was a guy, Hans, I can't remember his last name, that covered it. But it was handed to the Republican Speaker of the House, and they could have done something about it, and they chose not to. And here we are, fast forward this many years later. So,
hey, this isn't new to me, bro. And this was 2010, 2011?
Absolutely. It actually led. So here's the thing.
What?
It was frustrating as all get out, because the election was decided by one vote. And I have documented proof, not just of the Somali fraud, but also votes coming from vacant properties, all the whole show, right? Like, they didn't do anything about it. The FBI did take it, and what happened was a local news outlet went undercover and began filming these people that lived in different counties. And then also the vacant properties and all that stuff. And the block got a little hot, right? For the local press. So the Obama FBI actually had no choice but to handle it, and it took about 2 years. And the political foundation, the Somali Foundation, which was a political arm, actually shut down, and I believe that they kind of relocated to Minneapolis. If you want to know the truth, but people got prosecuted for it.
So this is something that they should have recognized developing in another area. 100%. Holy smokes. Clip that one, folks. Like, holy smokes.
Because what happens is it's the motor vote program. So they go to a local DMV. They have to get their license as a refugee, right? You have to get your license. They get put on the voter rolls. There's this is where I found out that there was no state in the United States that did background checks once somebody's on a roll. So like the state highway patrol or the attorney general's office or secretary of state's office, there was no outfit anywhere in any state that verified citizenship once they're on the rolls. So they would get identification as a refugee because you have to have identification to get, benefits and things like that. And they would mark that they're a citizen. They, being the translator, would mark that they're registered to vote, and they put on the rolls. They're counted as a citizen. They're counted in the census. All of these things, and they were on the voting rolls, and that's how they steal elections. That's one way. I mean, I'm not saying that's the only way, but that's one way. Yeah, absolutely. That's been happening. It's not like the party didn't know. I mean, I had conversation with Thor Hearn, who ran the Bush v. Gore situation in Miami, a phenomenal election attorney. He may have passed, but a phenomenal attorney, and he was very well aware of it. Went to the highest ranks. There was a video that a very high end. If folks don't know who Jack Cashill is, Jack is a Midwest. He's a conservative writer. One of the very good friends of this guy, who's a pretty wealthy Republican donor, volunteered at one of the precincts where these folks were and filmed the group voting where these 2 or 3 female translators were filling out 30 plus ballots, all those things. And he was instructed that his attorney was like, you probably need to delete this video. And but I saw it before he did. He met me at a bar and grill type of place and said, hey, I want to show you this so you can see it. But then I was instructed I need to delete it. And that was the reality, and nothing was done about it. But yeah. So, I mean, my situation, what you were asking about, was probably nine years later.
Wow. So, how do you get into this news that you're told that you have cancer? Were you just not feeling well? You go to the doctor. Was it just a checkup where they're like, hey, we got to tell you something you probably didn't know? Like, how do you come upon that, man?
So, I couldn't find a job, right? And I landed. I was miserable. I was doing some temp job in some office, just making like $11-12 an hour, until I could find something. And I got a phone call from this awesome guy named Joe, who was a manager for like a storm chasing roofing company. And I took a position. I went up to Omaha. I took a gamble. It was commission only. And I spent, quite frankly, that decade almost entirely as a storm, like selling roofs, storm chasing, hitting hailstorms, and making as much money as I could. And so I become a licensed claims adjuster as well. When I moved to Florida, I got an offer in Florida, and I was down there for we were down there for like 3 years. And then COVID happens, and the contractor who I was working for in South Florida, everything's gated. Obviously laid a lot of people off except for his family members that were like, 3 or 4 sales reps who had probably $15 million in contracts. Because in Florida, when you're doing roofing, you get it's all about the sheet, right? Like they're signing on a form to hand over the claim to the contractor to fight, and it always goes to litigation. and you got to get forensics engineers, the whole show. But it basically at that point in time, it was a slam dunk. They were going to settle for something, right? And these were big money, so it was like $15 million. So they kept them, but I had to find. I obviously got let go. I got a severance, but it wasn't much. And I relocated back to Kansas City because I couldn't find anything that was sustainable. And the other thing people don't realize is that there was like 11 million unemployed people in Florida during COVID because the hospitality industry was completely shut down. Because that is Florida's economy. You couldn't do cruises, you couldn't do all those things, and so a lot of people were unemployed. So I ended up getting an offer back to sell roofs and do claims back in the Midwest, and that's how I came back. But I was already feeling off. God was telling me in my heart, and like I kept just feeling like, man, you got to get home, son. You got to get home, son. You got to get home, son. That was like what I was hearing and feeling. And basically I had felt like, when you sleep on your arm and it goes to sleep, right? But it like kind of was never going away. And I had like this hint, just a little hint in my eye that was just a little foggy, I guess would be the word, but it was barely. It was something I noticed, but nobody else would have noticed. And they did EKGs down when I was in Florida. I actually went to emergency room thinking maybe I had like a small stroke, and by the graces of God, the EKGs were all good, but they didn't do any type of scan, like a CAT scan. And so when I came back to Kansas City, because I was a sole provider, right, at the time. And when I came back to Kansas City, it continued, like it got a little worse. I started getting this pressure in my head, and then it would go away real quick, and I get a little dizzy and it go away, and that kind of started getting a little longer. And then fast forward to September 2020, and I had to go to the emergency room.
Damn. And you get there, and how do they tell you?
So they did EKGs, everything came back. Which, Alpha, I mean, I'm not a super small dude, but I guess I got my grandpa, who was a World War II vet, lived to be 102 years old. I guess I got his genes apparently, because I was, I mean, when I do the EKGs, I'm like, they're going to find something, and, but, great genes, I guess, but everything came back. I mean, they did a vertigo test on me, passed it. They were doing all blood tests. I was, they had nothing. And the doctor said to me, hey, listen, you've been here quite a while. We've done every test. We just don't see anything. You probably need to drop some pounds, but everything looks good. If you just trust me, I want to do one more test. And that's when he wanted me to do the CT scan, the CAT scan. And that's when the results came in, and he came in, and I appreciate him for his straightforwardness in the moment, but he came in and he said, hey, listen, there's no easy way to say this, but you have a 7.5 inch centimeter brain tumor. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, this is a big deal. You probably need to call somebody. And so that's how it happened.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure these docs, they see this probably more often than they want to. So they've kind of learned the way to communicate it is just, put it out there and let's address it, but for something that's routine for them, it's something that's life-changing for you. I'm sure there's people in the audience that have been in that room with that doctor walking in to communicate that news to them, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
What was the first question in your head? Because, for like me, I wondered, like, what would be the first question I asked? Like, am I going to die from this? Can you fix this? Like how did that conversation happen from your end? Or do you even remember?
I just asked him, what's that mean? Like, what do you mean? What's that mean? And he was like, it's not good. And he was like, I want you to call somebody, but we're going to need to do some further tests to get this going. Otherwise, it won't be good for you.
And so once this started to kind of like balance out, you know, was there a point where the news got any worse than that?
Yeah. So I had to do an MRI, and I was put on bed rest for. So this is, keep in mind, I want to preface this by saying this. This is in the middle of COVID, right? The world's on fire. No one knows what's happening. I think a lot of us knew, right? But you know, it was not a good situation. And if you got COVID, whether you had a broken arm or a brain tumor, you weren't having surgery. They weren't going to allow you to have surgery. That's the environment that it was. And so I was put on bed rest for a month. And I couldn't see my kids. I could not get COVID because I couldn't get surgery for a month. And so that's just the reality. And it was a hard situation because my kids are my everything in life.
Jeez, man. And so did they finally end up having the surgery, or because, you know, eventually you kind of went into your own research? You know, I want to get there. I just want to lay out, you know, the pathway of how you got to a point where you started to do your own research.
Yeah. So, you know, so what's wild about this situation here, Alpha, is because this is when we first met, you know, and we were in crypto lawyer spaces. And I think this was around the Kyle Rittenhouse era, if I can remember. I can't remember precisely what it was. But it was a tough moment for me because I was the sole provider. When we moved back from Florida, we had separated. My wife and I had separated. She didn't want to move back from Florida, and there's whatever. And I won't talk all about that. But the point is, you know, there was a lot going on in my own personal life, but I had a responsibility and obligation to provide for my family and to keep a roof over their head. Right. And now I just got rocked. And on top of that, I can't even see my kids physically. You know, I can't even see my kids. FaceTime, okay. But I was, you know, obviously swelling up. While I was on bed rest, they had put me on a pill that essentially, it was a steroid, but it was to prevent me from having a seizure. And so I swelled up to like 343 pounds. So, and I'm not a very tall guy, man. I'm Latino and Greek, right? So, you know, I was a tick. You know what I mean? Like it was horrible. You know, I couldn't even, you know, I just couldn't even clean myself. You know what I mean? I had to get in the shower and that kind of stuff. I mean, it was worse than the cancer. I'll be real honest with you. The pill, whatever the pill was, and I, for whatever reason, my brain is not thinking of the name, but the point is that was worse than cancer. I would never take it again. And so I had swelled up that large. I was extremely depressed. They obviously did, they obviously resected it, a couple of days before Halloween of 2020.
What does that mean?
I had brain surgery.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And so they do what's called a halo, you know, so obviously they took, you know, that. And by the way, this is something that it's just a little petty, but I asked them to shave my entire head and they only shaved like this top part. I was obviously out cold. And so they kind of gave me a skullet, right? So like, you know, I was so mad about that, man. That was the one request I had. If you're going to shave my head, shave it all, you know? And so, yeah. So they resected it, sent it off. They came back. This was the beginning of November. So it came back like 7 days later, first week of November, 2020. I'm on bed rest. The election of 2020 takes place. I'm a very passionate person when it comes to elections. I just like, my body physically can feel when GOTV time is starting. Like I could smell it in the air. I love every moment of it. And for people that don't know what that is, it's like, dude, it's 30 days till election time. Like it's get out the vote time. You know what I mean? Like nowadays it's like, dude, the election is actually 60 days because of early votes and all this crap. But in 2020, especially, they were doing all these mail-in, unsolicited mail-in ballots and all these things that were just not heard of. And I knew it. I'm sitting here watching this stuff and like, I can't do nothing about it. And so I had to watch the 2020 election on bed rest, you know, and my only avenue of communication was talking to you, Alpha, in spaces nightly. Right. And so, but what nobody knew about this, because I didn't say anything really too much about it. And so they got it back. I had a meeting with my oncologist at the time, and I'm trained to read people. And so at the time, it's like a burqa, right? Everyone, full PPE, all you can see is this. I couldn't tell how old she was. I guessed that she was probably a little younger, but I couldn't get verification. And she came in and she delivered the news to me that it was a level 3 diffuse astrocytoma IDH1 wild type. And my life expectancy was 10 to 12 months. And yeah, that was tough.
If you remember, what's your reaction to that, man? Whether it was verbal or internal?
I went to a different place. You know, and well, my response was my response was okay. My first response was, you know, wait, what are the chances of me living past that? And she's in the direct quote was, well, if there was 10 people in a room, maybe one survives, maybe. And that's when I went to a different place. So, yeah.
I mean, you're a young guy, bro, you know,
39. Yeah.
And I imagine that that's a life-changing moment, whether you recognize it then or whether you recognize it in hindsight. So they're different situations, but it's that moment, because essentially what you're doing is you were just told, like, this is when you're going to meet death.
Yeah.
Like that's what's being told.
Yeah.
And I remember in 2003, you know, I'm sitting in this embankment and we're taking artillery fire and they're walking it on us and it's getting closer, and it gets to a point where they hits on the other side of the highway we're from, where we're getting the debris landing on us. It's like they're walking us, the next one's on us.
Yeah.
You know, like they're going to make that adjustment. The next one's on us. And our guys didn't do the math fast enough. And I remember I take off my Kevlar, and in there I had a picture of my two little ones at the time, Lily and Anastasia. And I remember just thinking, like, this is the image I want to be looking at.
Yeah.
When I die right now. Like, you know, not this awful smelling ditch, you know, not this country that I probably don't even belong in, you know, and I love my other Marines, but everybody's got their own moment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this helmet, you know, or the inside of my helmet with a picture of my little girls. And I just remember, like you said, you know, you go to a different place, man. I know what you mean by that in some aspect. Because I remember
your life.
Granted, this is all like within seconds.
Yeah.
But I remember I was angry, bro. Like, I know a lot of people probably won't understand this, but I was angry. Like, I was angry because I was like, I don't even get a chance to fight the guy that's going to kill me.
Right.
Like, I don't even know who is the guy that's going to kill me. I'm going to die in pardon my French, but I'm going to die in a fucking ditch in another country.
Yeah.
And I remember, but at the same time, this is the part that people probably won't get. I think you'll probably understand. At the same time, my heart's broken, bro. Yeah. Because these two little girls, and one was on the way, I remember thinking, you know, are they old enough to remember me? because one's 3, one's 2, well, they even forget what I look like. And that just broke me. So I'm angry, I'm broken. And then at the same time, it's like I start making pleas with God. And I remember one of the things that I just asked for is just time, bro. And I remember just telling God, if you give me more time, I promise I'll be the best dad. And I've always shared that. Here's the other promise that I've never shared this publicly. And I don't know why I promised this, but I did. I said, I promise I'll never stop learning. And I think about that. And, that was going to be instantaneous. Now, here's where my heart is just, it hurts for you right now. Because again, this all happened for me in under 30 seconds, like this whole evolution of emotion. But I also knew at the end of that evolution that, all right, God saved us. And that moment was over. Now, granted, there were more that came, but that moment was over. For you, that didn't last 30 fucking seconds. And that's the part that just gets me right here, man. What were the next days and weeks like for you?
Sorry.
No, take your time, man.
So I went into a dark place, and I didn't leave my room other than to go to the bathroom, shower, if that's what we call it, because I'm basically like a tick, you know what I mean? At this point, I'm so swollen. I didn't want to live. So, yeah.
That's a painful place, man. When and I understand, I don't want to say understand. I don't understand that, but I've had that question that I've asked in my life, as a cop, some of the calls that we go to are suicides. And I get there on the one that, is going to read a letter, because it's part of the investigation. And there's times where, there's not family around, it's like a neighbor or a friend that's calling like, hey, this person's not answering, so we got to force entry. And you're the first person to come upon, this body that was once alive. And we go into investigation mode. But there's times, especially early on with, issues with the coroner's office where it took hours, where you're there for hours with this body. And I remember specifically with suicides, I remember asking, like, myself, like, could anybody have stopped this? Like, if this person's phone would have rang as they were tying this noose or loading, the syringe or opening up the pill bottle, if somebody would have called at that moment, you're on mute.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
If somebody would have called at that moment, like, would it have give them enough pause to change their mind? That I would always ask that question. Could if somebody have impacted and changed it? And then the other question I asked myself is, how much pain does someone have to be in that this is the only decision that they felt was left? And stuff just hurt, man. It just hurt to know that, right now, all, me and you, the people watching this show, when this show's over, we're going to go back to living our lives. We're going to go back to what's the next task I got to do, do the laundry, feed the kids, get some stuff ready for work. Like, life goes on. But this is why I find this show so important to me, is to remind us of, like, these stories, you're one person, I'm one person, but in the millions and billions of people on this planet, like, there's so many stories like this, man. And if we had a chance to hear them, that maybe if we can reevaluate our lives, maybe these shows can change that, and make us consider different options. Or sometimes we just got to realize, maybe I'm not loving my kids enough, maybe I'm not loving my wife or my husband enough, or what, it's been a while since I've called my mom or my dad, or when was the last time I invited my brother or sister to go have lunch. When we hear these stories, I think it at least gives us pause to remind ourselves, am I going so fast in life that I'm forgetting about the value of it?
Yeah.
And, right now you're talking about going into that dark place, but you didn't stay there and you didn't fold, and you became the hero in your own story. And I want to know how that happened. I want my audience to hear, like, how did that happen, man? How do you go from so much pain to just, I'm going to be that one person?
So, I had already underwent surgery. I was recovering from surgery, and I had to recover. So actually I had surgery, and within 2 days of having brain surgery, I was walking like weak. I was very weak, but I was walking. And so they had said everybody on the floor had COVID. And my neurosurgeon was like shocked that I was strong enough and overachieving enough to where he was like, if you have someone who can take care of you, I think it's best that you do it at home, because I don't want you to get COVID in here. This whole floor has COVID right now. They're on the ventilators. We all know the path that's going down. So I had recovered from home, and this is by the way, prior to the note that, to them sending it off and me being notified of what this is. Right. And so I was recovering from home, and then I got that information a week later, basically. So essentially I kind of looked like a baseball, I had staples and stuff and my, all that stuff. And so, I mean, and basically like they did a good job, but whatever. And so this is when I got the news. Fast forward a week later, I went to a dark place. And I got choked up because it wasn't fair for my kids. They were too young to have that conversation with them. But more than anything, when I was in this dark place and I wasn't leaving my room, my father had come to me one night and had said, like, you got to overcome, son. You got to get up. He said, I'm going to die watching you die. And that was so jacked up. That was jacked up. It hit me. And that night, I obviously when he was in there, I kind of had my, I just was in a zone, man. I can't even explain it. Just staring at a ceiling, letting life waste. And that night, actually, it was probably like 2 a.m, and I had I woke up and I just like looked over, and there was like an apparition. It was a clear outline of my mom's mom. She had like a slant with her hip, way she standing, because when I was a kid, when I was very small, she was eventually going to become disabled, where she couldn't really walk. She had to drag her leg or whatever, or whatever. But back when I was really small, when I say really small, 5, she babysat me every day with my brothers, because she lived across the street from us. And she was full-blooded Greek and a tough woman. Oh my gosh, tough woman, That's why I don't eat liver and onions to this day. I got this belt that she had. I'd have to put my hands on the table and she would just smack me until I said uncle and would eat the liver and onions. And that just never happened because I was not going to say uncle and eat onions, And, but that was the mindset because back in those days, she didn't have they didn't grow up, she was her parents were Greek immigrants. And, back in those days, man, liver was your protein, you know what I mean? And that was like your protein, and so, I remember being shocked because I was like, Grandma? And I could just feel her presence. And my dad's mom literally died praying the rosary. She was the holiest woman I've ever met in my life. Okay. Holier. But my grandma never talked to me. My mom's mom never talked to me about faith. What she would talk to me about is the fireside chats and how important it is to be an American. Talk about, history and stories of when she was a kid, hearing the voice of FDR, right? Like a president. This is like, and then then getting a television and being able to see some of these people for the first time. And her parents, they had like a little corner grocery store in Medford, Massachusetts, what she say, Medfa, and with their accent, but it was like they had like a little corner grocery store, and she begged her father to get a TV, and so that she could see who she's been hearing, and how important that was to her. And she had a photo of Reagan, and she talked about all of these all these presidents, and no matter what party they were, you honor them because this is your country. You don't have this freedom anywhere else in the world. But it was like just her and I, because, I would just sit on her couch and just lay there and listen to her talk while she watched Larry King live or whatever, and so it was her that taught me the importance of these things. Right. And my dad was a Vietnam veteran too, and he was very proud to be an American, right? But man, my grandma would have these conversations, and there she was, and I just felt this sense of calm, and so that's when I decided to get up and fight for my life, and I called out to God that night to save my life, and I would do anything I could. If he spared me, I would tell my story to anybody who ever asked. And I just asked him to save me. And, I'm forever thankful. It's actually a little moving for me because it's the most spiritual moment of my life. And the rest of it is just unexplainable. It's only explained through God. Right. Like that nurse did not factor in God in the 10 people that were in that room. Right. And what I didn't know at that time, was what would come to me, because of God. And you've highlighted this on your show, Alpha, quite a bit actually. But I had all of these people suddenly coming into my life because, they had like people online posts and Facebook, and, there was, my sister-in-law had at that point in time set up like a Give, Send, Go or GoFundMe or something. And I was so forever thankful because it helped pay the bills, at that moment. But it was these people that came out of nowhere to talk about fenbendazole and their story. Like, you got to call this person, or I had stage 4 this, or, breast cancer or melanoma or pancreatic cancer or, colon cancer, brain cancer, a glioblastoma, you know what I mean? On the stem, that's a death sentence, and it was all all starting to come at once. I finally got to see my, well, it actually started the week before Thanksgiving of that year, I got to see my kids physically for the first time Thanksgiving of that year. And that was when my brother-in-law, his great dude, first approached me and was like, "Hey, I don't know how, I'm not telling you to take this, but this family, it was a big family, here in town, a big ag family, was like, they wanted me to tell you to look into fenbendazole, and it's a dog warmer. And I know you think it's weird." This is exactly what he said. "I know you think it's weird. I know it sounds weird, man. And I'm not telling you to take it." But they were very serious about it. And I think you should look at it, because they had a sister that had cancer, and she had went through this protocol and a few other things, you know what I mean? But the point is this protocol, and it saved her. And then there was another person that they knew who had the brainstem, stage 4, his glioblastoma. And he was still alive all these years later. And then all these other people, from online or whatever, would be sending you DMs or whatever it was on Facebook, and man, I'm forever thankful for that moment.
And here's the thing, folks. Chris, this is why God's plan is as hard and unfair as it seems. It's still always perfect, because Chris becoming a cancer survivor and going through, the experience he shared with us and learning this information, made him authority on how to survive. And different people that have come to me with bad news, people that were in that room the way Chris was, that have came to me and said, "Hey man, here's where I'm at. This is what I was given. I know you talk to all these different doctors and stuff." And I do, and I say, "Hey, here's the links and the doctors." But I say, "Let me tell you a story about my friend." And I didn't know it to the detail that you shared with us tonight. But I tell people, listen, like your brother-in-law, I know this shit sounds crazy, but I'm not going to be sending you to Walgreens. I'm probably going to be sending you to like Tractor Supply, so be prepared out for that, or, PetSmart or Petco or something, because there was a war on it, especially over the last couple of years. Oh, yeah. It's glory to God that it's becoming accessible now to people. And, you were finding this information when it was purposefully being buried, and you were relentless in pursuing to get the information on this, and kind of the means you had to do, some of the, like, the quote unquote pet supplies, to do this. What was it like, when how did you learn that it was working? I guess that's the question I want to ask.
So what I tell people all the time is this: if you have a diagnosis of cancer, and I'm a big believer of this, family members go through cancer with the person who has cancer, right? Like, you get chemo, radiation. You can't like sleep in the same bed with people. You have to change your sheets all the time. You can't hug people like you used to. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have intimacy like you used to. Your life completely changes in so many ways. And so what I always say to people is and this is for me, and I never said anything to anybody about it until I personally experienced it, right? Because I didn't want to provide any information that wasn't true. But when I started looking at, okay, how am I going to overcome and survive? I downloaded, you have your Safari on your iPhone. Google was a browser I was so used to using. And we'll come back to that part at some point. But the point is that I downloaded DuckDuckGo and Brave. And I actually didn't even know about Brave. I think it was you, Alpha, in a space that was like, you need to be using Brave, bro. And that's how I found out. If it wasn't for Spaces on X at this time, I would have never even known about Brave. And so I downloaded it, and if I looked up fenbendazole on Google at the time, it was all, doesn't work. NIH says this does not work, blah, 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 blah. King Fauci says whatever. And it was big pharma, right? Chemo, radiation, whatever. But when I go to DuckDuckGo, the results would be slightly different. And when I would go to Brave, I would see these peer reviews and these other studies and these things that were not big pharma. And I learned in that moment that the NIH and Dr. Fauci have known about fenbendazole and the positive effects against cancer there's arguments to say since, the late 70s and maybe before, but like Fauci and the NIH in particular, because he takes over the NIH in like the 80s, they knew about this since the late 80s, early 90s, but for sure knew about it in 2000 because there was a doctor, an Indian doctor, who worked for in Houston, and the big cancer hospital. I'm so sorry. Whatever. But the point is, I think you know what I'm talking about. And the point is he had all these people from the agricultural community coming and telling him the same stories that I was hearing from people. And he went to them and was like, hey, I feel like we need to look into this. This is a quick summary. People can go and look at this. And they refused to do it. They've refused to do a phase trial. He took these people's information, was like, hey, look, I've done my research. These are the stories. He did a presentation. They said, no. no. And so he went on his own. He went in his own practice. And if you look at the review studies from NIH in the early 2000s, they said fenbendazole doesn't work. There is no evidence that fenbendazole works. There's no evidence ivermectin works. There's no evidence of any of these things. Boom, 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 boom. And it wasn't until 2017, I think it was 2018, there was a guy in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who took this regiment with fenbendazole, and he did like CBD and all this stuff, but he had cancer all over his body. About long story short, is 2 news outlets picked it up, a paper in Baltimore and a paper in Tulsa, his hometown. And the only reason why people found out about this was because on Facebook, it went viral in Asia, like Japan, Korea, Asia. This went bonkers. Okay. And so people on Facebook began to find out about it. And this guy's story was what it was. So this has been a long going thing through the agricultural community. And they all had the same stories, right? Like somebody from the agricultural community came to them after the church, prayed for them because they got the bad news, that kind of stuff. And the person comes to them and says, hey, listen, I do not want you to die. I want you to meet with me, hear me out, And so the guy that I talked to on the Iowa border had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, was given 3 to 6 months to live. And he was a young dude like me, married with kids. He was given a death sentence, 3 to 6 months to live. This was the September. Well, right, frankly, like he had diagnosed, like I think the same time I did. And this guy on a feedlot said, same story. And he was like, nah, I don't think so. And the guy said to him, what the hell do you have to lose? And so this guy's cousin or brother reaches out to my ex-father-in-law, who was a very serious guy, probably wasn't my biggest fan. And he calls me up. He was an old iron worker, calls me up very animated. You are going to call this guy. Here is his number. I want to know if you call him. You tell me when you called him, And I was like, Bob, okay, I'll call him, And anyway, the point is, I call the guy, and the guy, we talk, and in full transparency, I had started chemo and radiation, and I was beaten down. I was weak. It was horrible. They had resected my tumor, but there still was cancerous residue in my brain, and the type of tumor I had means it's going to come back. Okay. That's basically the summary of it, of the long name. And this guy says to me, he tells me his story. Within 2 weeks of the regimen, so the cancer had metastasized to this guy's liver. So many cancer spots on his liver, pancreatic cancer to his liver, that they couldn't count how many of them were there. Within 2 weeks, the cancer spots on his liver were gone, and his blood score, I guess it's a pancreatic cancer thing. I think the people who maybe watch this and maybe have pancreatic cancer or have went through it probably know what I'm talking about. It's a little different with brain cancer, but the score, whatever that was, dropped significantly. They started calling him a miracle patient. By the time he spoke to me, his cancer score, the blood score, whatever it was under 100. It was like, I mean, this, I'm talking, dude, we're talking about like a 200-point drop plus, right? And he said to me the same words, like, listen, man, what the hell do you have to lose? And I ordered it that day on Amazon, and it was, it was dog warmer. That's what it is. Safeguard, not with the heart warmer, just regular Safeguard dog warmer, in like they come in a pack with 3 pouches with powder. And I started putting it in Greek yogurt like the guy told me, and I obviously cut out the sugars and all that stuff. And
wasn't Big Pharma, just a tech issue.
Yeah. Tech issue was not Big Pharma or Fauci. Although he has not been arrested yet, and I would but whatever. That's my, we can go down that road at some point down the road, whatever. The point is, so it was dog warmer. And I came to my folks and I said, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Right. Like, and I'll never forget, my dad said to me, he was like, what? You're going to what? And he was an old school cat. Right. And he's like, all right, listen, I trust you done your research. You're going to do what you're going to do. No one's going to stop you. But if you start dragging your ass across this floor, I'm cutting it off, So
anyone who owns a dog or a cat knows exactly what that was about.
And so anyway, started taking it, man. And what I will tell people is this, it definitely was a regimen that I took. But the point is that it's not an instant thing. Right? Like, it's going to take time. My experience is it took, you're talking 4 to 6 weeks before you really saw it take full effect on the body, because it's battling something that's not human. Right. And so, but in my instance, I was having to do MRIs after surgery every 3 months, and my scan in November was not good. Even though they resected the tumor, there was still what they would refer to as like nerve or peripheral cancer. That quite frankly, the human, you can only get so much of everything without taking a risk of causing some severe damage. And I'm very fortunate, by the way, my neurosurgeon, the only thing that came out of my situation was at one point I had like a twitch in my left thumb. And so I was very fortunate, because I was afraid that I'd be paralyzed to be a vegetable, or maybe even worse, I wouldn't remember my kids or my family. So there was things I had to do, right? Like I had to write down passwords, bank passwords, my kids' information, memories that I had of my kids, memories of my own brothers, and things that would make me recognize who I was in that event. Like, these are things that, like, you never even think about at 39 years old. You know what I mean? And so I had to do that while I was recovering. And so I started taking this, man. And within my next MRI was, in January, and those, fiber nerve, read tumor, micro tumors, because they show up on a different color on your MRI, just for folks who want to know what, because it's like literally blood going to that area, right? And so it shows up a different color. They were almost entirely gone. By my next quarterly MRI, they were gone. And so some people could say, well, it was the radiation. It was which was a horrible deal, by the way, horrible moment in my life. But it could have been the chemo and all these things. But I know that to be the fact that it wasn't. I mean, I'm sure the radiation chemo had some impact. I'm not discounting radiation and chemo, right? I'm just simply saying that the science now is showing that this, when combined also with ivermectin now, is a 1-2 punch against both COVID and cancer.
Let me ask you this, because we have to start bringing this to an end, even though I don't want to. Do you still from time to time do like recurring treatments of like fenbendazole and ivermectin, or?
So actually, you know, I don't know if you remember this, Alpha. It was like 2022. I had COVID on my birthday. And I actually spent 2 birthdays with COVID, believe it or not. It was just terrible. But the point is I had COVID on my birthday. I had posted on X like ivermectin works, because there was a gal, ironically, this gal named Michelle Peterson, who was a nurse that I came across on an online virtual visit, who happened to also be frequenting spaces with that Monica and I would host together. She was like, I was like, wait a second, hold on a second. And so anyway, God's amazing, right? Like, this is a God thing. Okay. Cause she's, Michelle's a very amazing person, very spiritual. But the point is, I had ivermectin and she wasn't sure. And she did the right thing in telling me, like, don't take this while you're taking ivermectin, because I don't know, I don't want to put you at risk. Right. No one knew. Right. Like, so the point is, I went like an entire year without taking it. And I've kind of, fell off the wagon a little bit, would drink some root beer and do, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And it actually had a reoccurrence in November of 2022. And I had a spot on the side where they resected. And then I also had one on the other side. And they wanted me to do chemo and radiation again. And it was a powerful moment for me. It was a very tough moment for me. But I told him I'm not going to do the chemo and radiation. And at the time, Monica and we were part of like there was a prayer group, and they had been praying for me. Actually, I think there was a space or something, because I was going into this meeting, and I made that decision. But when I got the MRI reading in November, I immediately was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't been taking this. And I was taking it every day, like 6 days a week, right? And taking a day off consistently. But because most of that year I had not, because of the ivermectin that I had for a few, because of the COVID. And so I immediately started taking it. My sister, my niece, had ordered, she's a vet tech. So she had ordered like a big canister, right? And sent it to me, and I'm forever thankful for that. And so the point was, because they were censoring me, dude, like I could only order 1 pack of wormers. So I'd have to go to like Amazon was blocking me. And that's how thick the censorship was back then. And so I would have to go to Chewy. I'd have to go to Tractor Supply. I'd have to go to all these different places to find my boxes. And so, but then she got me this big canister, and I'm forever thankful for that. So I started taking it immediately, and said no. They said, okay, well, we're going to do another scan in January for your quarterly. Went ahead and did it. And the tumor on what they thought was a tumor on the side that they had resected the other one was completely gone. And on the other side, it was down to about 25% of the size. And by the next, they were like, okay, well, by the next MRI, we're going to do another quarterly MRI. But if this is bad, like you're going to have to make a decision. And by that next MRI, they was gone. And every one of my MRIs have been stable since then, knock on wood and blessing, and praying that continues to be the case. But they moved me from it to every 4 months since then every 6 months. And then in November of last year, I got moved to every 9 months of MRIs. So
God is good, man. Did they ever ask you, hey, what are you doing, man?
You know what? It was, I had this doctor, man, this oncologist. And actually, God places people, and I left this part out of my story because whatever. But the point is I ended the gal I told you about with the mask covered. I ended up firing her. Actually, it's like I don't. And I asked for an Indian doctor at this hospital, and he just said to me, quite frank, we're not equipped to handle what the cancer you have. we're equipped to handle breast cancer, standard cancer stuff. You need someone who understands brain tumors. We're just not equipped for that. And I said, well, somebody who is. Like, I want somebody, an Indian doctor. And he said, man, we're not all created the same, blah, 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 blah. I said, dude, stop. Just tell me someone you know. And I'm a big believer in this because my son had an injury. And the bottom line is that there was always, in that moment, his doctor did other things that the big pharma trained American doctors a lot of times don't bring in, which is like a vitamin D3 elevated regimen, all of these different things. And so he had said, well, there is a guy, and he was world renowned. His name was Amandeep Kalra. Okay. And if you live in South Florida, if you ever get a cancer diagnosis, I would call Amandeep Kalra. He has now moved to South Florida and started his own practice, but he was world renowned. He's one of the best in the entire world. And he was particularly focused on the type of brain tumor that I had. And because it was unpredictable. And I'm forever thankful for that guy, because he also was a really good person when I was going through a divorce, because I was also going through a divorce at the time. And it was just tough, man. And he was there in a lot of other ways, but he just kept saying, whatever it is you're doing, keep doing it. Just keep doing it. He knew something didn't make sense. This is a guy who was highly intelligent. He was an oncologist, a neurosurgeon, oncologist, and then an MD, right? He graduated high school. I think he graduated high school when he was like in 8th grade or something, 9th grade,
He was a genius.
He's freaking world renowned and very cool. And so anyway, the point is he started his practice down in Miami. But before he left, I happened to, because I was also doing claims at the time, because I had to continue to provide, and I ended up running into him at an airport, actually. And I had a great moment to be able to tell his little kids, like, I got down on their level and I just said, your dad saved my life. And that was really cool, and he saved my life in that he did some biomarkers and some things that gave me a different path to where I understood what I was battling versus just, you got a brain tumor, right? There's some medical markers and some things now that people can find. And that was very helpful.
Man, God is good. I'd keep talking to you for hours on this, man, but we got a hard stop because of another show. But I want to do this. We bypassed the rapid fire questions, but I do want to ask one question from that rapid fire, because I think it's important. And let me find where it was. Give me 1 second, because a lot of these you actually answered during the thing. Oh, here it is. Okay, what's one thing you stopped caring about when this thing happened in your life?
Stress. If you're no matter what you're battling in life, okay, but specifically if you get a terminal diagnosis, the way you're going to live is through prayer, is through a positive mindset, and removing yourself from the most stressful environments in your life. You have to do a self-audit. Part of that self-audit for me was, unfortunately, it was a marriage of mine. And you have to make decisions, and I had to really pray through some things. And I'm not going to say that like this, I mean, it was already rocky and way rocky, but the point is, you have to do a self-audit, and the decisions that come with that are not going to be comfortable. And if they are comfortable, then you didn't do a proper self-audit. You got to pull yourself away from the stress and always have a positive mindset. And you have to know how to pray. You have to petition God, not just please save me, but petition him and ask for people you've wronged to forgive you, and for people who have wronged you to help him help you overcome those wrongs through him, right? Like he can help you with that. But if you petition him and you learn how to do that, there's power. That's immense power in prayer. And I would not be here today if it wasn't for God. Not at all.
100%, man. You know, God gives the hardest battles in life to the people he sees as the strongest warriors. So, you know, God's expectation of you was never doubted. You know, he knew who he created. You know, he knows the story. You just need to recognize the faith that he had in you.
And you got to every moment, Alpha, every second, even even the bad moments, the moments that you're just like, oh my gosh, like crying, things went south, financial problems, job, you lose a job, kid is the teenager, like that just walked in the room whenever I'm in the middle of a show, comes from our moms and dude, I'm here for that moment, right? Which I wouldn't be. You got to cherish every single moment, the good and the bad, and especially the bad, because that is when you learn the most from God. That is the transformational moments. It's not the good ones. It's not when you're flush with money or things are going right. It's the storms. It's the storms that train you and change you. And I just think it's so cool that I got the opportunity to battle what I battled, looking back. But in that moment, it was very scary, and I'm forever thankful.
Well, I'm very thankful that we got to have this conversation. I'm extremely thankful that I get to call you a friend. And I'm thankful that my audience got to hear this because, tens of thousands of people are going to see this show. And statistically, at least one, if not many, are going to be facing something like that. And you just being present is hope for those people. Without even knowing your story, just you being present is hope for them. And that alone made this entire show today perfect. The other thing I want to say real quick, you saw it scrolling across the bottom of the screen. The links will be down in the description. If you want to go follow Chris, which I invite you to do it, to go follow his ex. And the other thing I'll say is this is not the last you've heard from Chris, because he will be coming back on the AlphaWarrior Show, because he's going to be launching a podcast here soon, folks. I've been on him because of that geopolitical mind that he has and his ability to recognize these patterns. He is an asset that we need. So, the Chris Moreno Show, or whatever he calls it, hopefully will be around the corner. When it does, we'll bring him back. And I know you guys will help support him and push it. So with that, you guys, speaking of thinking positive, our last ad, and then make sure you're tuned in to Devolution Power after this. But Valentine's Day is right around the corner. Don't judge me. Just go ahead and support us and go to this link. You guys will enjoy this. See you next time. The following ad is rated M for mature. Soft Disclosure wants you to get naked this Valentine's Day with limited edition his and her bundles that save you 20% off the individual retail prices. Proprietary oil infusions, grass-finished beef tallow, goat's milk from American goats, locally grown herbs and ingredients. Soft Disclosure is putting America First fruits on your skin.
And for these sexy bundles, we've added an all-new boar's haired beard brush and a solid jade gua sha. And the reason I'm here is because Alpha doesn't know how to say these words.
Gusha. His, hers. We need a moment to calm down. Don't hide your skin. Disclose it. Get naked this Valentine's Day with Soft Disclosure. Head over to softdisclosure.com and save 20% off individual retail prices with our his and hers customizable bundles, and use promo code NAKED to save 15% off the rest of the site. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. Promo code does not apply to bundle discounts.